We're now on Daf Kuf Amid Beis, and we're 3 lines down from the top, and we're discussing a case of a Taroves, and we don't know who's the Kohen and who is not the Kohen. So we're up to the words Hoya Echad Yisrael V'Echad Kohen, 3 lines down from the top of Kuf Amid Beis. We already saw in the Mishnah that if you have a Safek Kohen, Safek Yisrael, then those dinim that apply as a Kohen will have to apply because he might be a Kohen. And on that side of the Safek, we have to impose upon him those dinim that apply to a Kohen. Now we have the case, if you recall, of a woman who was divorced or widowed from her first husband. She got married within 3 months to a second husband. And let's look at the 2 husbands. Echad Yisrael, the Echad Kohen, and we don't know whether this child is the son of the Kohen or the son of Israel, because it could be that this is a Ben Teichel Rishon, or perhaps alternatively a Ben Shiva Achron L'Sheni, is now, what's the status of this child who might be a Kohen as far as marriage laws is concerned? No Seisha Ruila Kohen. He's not allowed to marry a Grusha or a Zona or a Chalola because he might be a Kohen. The ain metame lemesim, he's not allowed to enter into a cemetery or come in contact with a corpse, a dead body. However, a Vadai Kohen, if he deliberately, with Edom and Asra, comes in contact with a dead body, he will get Malchus. But in this case, Im Nitma, even if deliberately, intentionally, he became Tomei to a mess, Eino Sofik Esarpam. He's not Chayav Malchus full and Nefesh Lo Yitama B'Amo because he might not be a Kohen at all. So L'Chatchila, we're going to prohibit him from entering into a cemetery or marrying a Zona Chalola or a Grusha, but nevertheless, as far as giving him Malchus, if he went in and violated deliberately that law, that we can't give him. It's only a suffix. We don't know what his status. We can't give him truma because if he's Yisrael, and Yisrael that eats truma, it's chayav misa b'dei shamayim. And I would add the same halach would apply to his wife. When this young man grows up and gets married, his wife would not be able to eat truma, even though the wife of Kohen is allowed to eat truma, but we don't know if he's a Kohen. Now, if a Kohen eats truma, he's mekayim a mitzvah. If a Yisrael eats truma, then it depends. If he did it b'mezid, he's chayav misa b'dei shamayim. If he did it b'chog, he has to pay keren v'chodesh. He has to pay the value, 100% the keren of the truma that he ate, plus add another 20%. But in this case, where we don't know if he's a Kohen or Yisrael, we can't demand him to pay a keren v'chodesh, because he might be a Kohen, and a Kohen who eats truma is allowed to eat truma. So once again, if achal truma b'shogeg, we have to add the word b'shogeg, eino mishalim keren v'chomesh, because although a zar she'achal truma b'shogeg is chayav a keren v'shogeg, we're not sure that he's a zar. He might be a Kohen. He's allowed to eat truma. So again, if you want to force him to pay keren v'chomesh, he's going to say, no, I'm a Kohen. And he might be right. Maybe he is a Kohen. If you want to give him Malchus for being a Tamil Mesiv, then he has a right to say, maybe I'm a Kohen. I'm sorry, maybe I'm a Yisrael. Therefore, I'm allowed to be Tamil Mesiv. I'm wondering what happens, I'm talking now to Steve because in light of our previous discussion, what would happen if the Safek Kohen, Safek Yisrael went ahead and he married a Zona, Chalola, and Grusha? Would we bust up the marriage? Because, Don, you weren't here in the morning, but we discussed whether Bezdin can break up a marriage in a case where they're not sure that there's a valid reason to break up the marriage. Let's say, for example, there's a rumor that he's a nitan, that he had a relationship with this one, but we don't know for sure that he did, and we're not going to break up the marriage. What about a case of a Safek Kohen who marries a Zona? I don't know. I'm tempted to think in that case we would break up the marriage. V'eino cholek ala goren. So, the goren is like the granary. That's where they gave out truma. They divvied out truma. The Kohen would come around, and the owner of the field would decide which Kohen he wants to give his truma to. But this Safek Kohen could not put his hand out and ask for truma. He might be Yisrael. Now, this is what we call dinei momenos. Again, clearly he's not going to eat the truma. As we said before, eino ochel the truma. He might be chayav visa b'dei shamayim, but does he have rights to say, well, I'm a Kohen, give me the truma? He won't be able to eat the truma because eino ochel the truma, but at least he can demand the truma and then sell it on the Kohen market. Yet he's not going to get full price. So that's what we're saying now, that eino cholik ala goren. We're not going to allow him to demand truma, even on a monetary basis. He won't eat the truma, but he wants it because maybe he's not a Kohen. Now, again, I would ask the same question I asked before. What happens post facto if somehow, he didn't tell the Yisrael that I'm a Safek? He told Yisrael, hey, I'm a good old Kohen. Yisrael gave him truma, and now the Yisrael force him to cough up the truma, so to speak, return the truma. Or does he have a right to say, I'm motzi mechavero, all of a raya, you prove that I'm not a Kohen. And until you prove that I'm not a Kohen, I can claim I'm a Kohen, and you can't force me to return the truma. This reminds us of a very famous sugya. I think I mentioned it before in Bab Metzia, at the beginning of Bab Metzia. It says, talk to Kohen, ein motzia miyad. You have a Safek Bechar, and the Kohen grabs onto it, and he says, I'm sure it's a Bechar. We don't know if it's a Bechar. And the Yisrael wants to get it back from him. He can't do so because now the Kohen has possession over the Safek Bechar. Maybe there's a similar halacha, parallel halacha here in Truma with regard to the Safek Kohen. Next, umocher atruma v'adamim shelo. This is really interesting. Yisrael has to be mafresh truma, and the Kohen comes along and demands the truma. But a Kohen, he doesn't have to fork over the truma to another Kohen. He can keep it for himself. Now, this fellow is a Safek Kohen. When he's mafresh truma, no Kohen can force him to cough up the truma, to fork over the truma, because he says, I'm a Kohen. Again, he doesn't know he's a Kohen, but he might be a Kohen. And now we're going to apply the principle of Hamotzi Mechavero Olav Haraya. And we're going to say that if a Kohen comes along and says, look, you are Mafresh Truma, you're Yisrael, give me the Truma. He has right to say, no, I'm not going to give you the truma. I'm a Kohen. And he won't be able to eat the truma. He can only sell the truma on the open market, but he owns the truma. He can't eat the truma because he might not be a Kohen. So again, if this guy comes along to the Goren and he says, give me truma because I'm a Kohen, we're not going to give him truma. If on the other hand, he has his own truma that he was mafresh from his own payrolls, and the Kohen now comes along and says, fork over the truma, he doesn't have to do so. He can say, I'm a Kohen and I want to keep it for myself. On the other hand, he can't eat the truma because he might not be a Kohen, he's Israel, and he's chayav misim b'shamayim if a zar eats truma. Okay, now we get to the Beis Hamikdash, to the Karbanos. Eino cholek the kodshei kodshim. Now the halach is the kodshei kodshim. The kohanim get the oros, and the hides are worth money. So in kodshei kodshim, the hides, which are now designated for kohanim, and this fellow comes along and he says, you know what, I'm a Kohen. We're not going to give him a chelik in the oros, in the hides. Now, I don't know why this is any different than Eino Cholek ala Goren in the case of Truma. There are additional chiddush over here. I don't know. The Ein Notzen Lo Es HaKadoshim. Once again, I don't know why do you have to add that? You just finished telling me in a cholik the kodshei kodshim. I'm just wondering, see if I could possibly trouble you for I'm with Mechila. I'm really sorry. Should have taken care of it before we started. Again, we're up to Ein Notznim Lo Es HaKodshim. Taking a break to move this here. So let me try to figure this out. Thanks so much. The Eino Cholek v'Kodshei Kodshim, that we said was the Oros, and now what's Ein Nosten Lo Es HaKodshim? So he quotes a Rashi here that we're talking about Bechor. So I'm assuming here that Bechor is paradigmic of what we call Matnos Kahuna. And the Bechor, let's say I have a Bechor, I have to give it to a Kohen. Don, you wouldn't mind. Right, so I'm going to give you my Bechor. And once again, I'm going to have to assume that this is a repeat of what we saw before, V'yeinu Cholek al Hagore. And that was a reference to Truma, which is also one of the Matnas Kuhun. The Ein Motzin Shalom Miyad. Let's say he has a Bechor, this Safek, and the Kohen comes along and says, I want your Bechor. You're Chayiv in Matnas Kuhun. He says, no, I'm a Kohen. I don't have to give it to you. And once again, we're going to apply the principle of Asafeh of Motzi Mechavel of Araya. You have to prove that I'm not a Kohen. Disprove my claim that I'm a Kohen. Upatur min azroa v'lachayayim v'akevu. And he doesn't have to give matnas kahuna. Like we said before, in the case of Truma, he doesn't have to give the Kohen the Truma. Here too, in the case of Zroa l'chayim v'keva, these are also matnas kahuna. He doesn't have to fork over the matnas kahuna because he claims that he's a Kohen. Now we said if he has a bechor, then he doesn't have to give it to the Kohen because he can claim I'm a Kohen. However, you want to keep the bechor. The bechor on the tzad that you're Yisrael has kedushas mizbeach, the status of bechor. So what are you going to do? You're going to say, well, I'm a Kohen, but maybe you're Yisrael. And on the side of Yisrael, this bechor has to be brought on the mizbeach. So the halacha here is roeh ad she'istoi. So again, on the one hand, we can't force him to give it to the Kohen. He has the right to say I'm a Kohen. On the other hand, he has to treat it and himself as a Safek Yisrael, which would mean that he have to give it to the Kohen, and it has Kedushas Bechor, and it's a korban that has to be brought on the Mizbeach. The answer is we cannot be makriv this Bechor on the Mizbeach because it's a Safek Kohen, Safek Zar, a non-Kohen. And on the side that he's a Kohen, there's no Kedushas Bechor. What do we do with this Bechor that we don't know whether it's Kadosh or not? Is Yirad She'ipol Mu? Let it go out to the pasture until it swallows a needle or something, and it becomes a mu. And then, Shubal Mu, Mutal Shofto, Li'achol Mimenu Af Lizor. Now we go weiter. The nosen all of Chumrei Kohen and the Chumrei Yisrael. All right, so now we're talking about Mincha. You remember that there's a fundamental difference between Minchas Yisrael, which requires Kmitza, and after the Kmitza, the Shirayim are eaten by Zichrei Kahuna, as opposed to a Minchas Kohen, which is Kulo Kolin. It doesn't require Kmitza, and it's burnt on the Mizbeach. So in this case, when he brings a Mincha, on the one hand, we're going to require Kmitza, because maybe he's Yisrael. On the other hand, we can't allow for the Achilas Shirayim Why? Because maybe it's a Minchas Kohen. A Minchas Kohen is Kulo Kolin. Right, so this we had a whole sugya before in Kufam and Al. Now we get to the next generation. What's the deal? Again, all this is in this long Mishnah. In a case of Safek Bino Shel Kohen Zeh, Safek Bino Shel Kohen Ach. So what happens if we have a child that's born to a Kohen? We know the father's a Kohen. We're not sure which of the two Kohanim is the real father. So a woman likes to marry Kohen. Maybe she's from a Kohenic family, so she wants to marry Kohen. So she married one Cohen, and now she's marrying a second Cohen. We don't know if the child is the son of the first Cohen or the second Cohen. So now the child is definitely a Cohen. Who onen alein, vehem onenim olav. Now you know that when one of the seven close relatives dies, then the surviving relative, is an onen. And an onen, according to biblical law, is enjoined from eating kosher. Now, one of these two possible fathers died. We don't know if he was the father of this child. Who onen alein. He's not going to be allowed to eat kosher, neither for the after the death of the first husband or the second. Because in each case, he's in a state of safek onen, which means that we have doubts as to whether or not he is permitted to eat kosher. Therefore, we're going to prohibit him from eating kosher. Now it says, "V'heim onenim olav." When he dies, then each one of those fathers, and both of them are Kohanim, will be enjoined from eating kosher because each one might be an onen. Because each one might be the father of this young man. Now the question is, if the son loses one of these two fathers, will he be allowed to bury his father and enter into a cemetery? Which means that, let's say father X died. He's definitely a Kohen. He can't enter into a Beis HaKfaras to bury the person who might be his father because maybe he's not his father. And there's no heter on an Isur Lav Dorais for Kohen to enter into a cemetery unless he's obligated to bury the dead. But we don't know if he's obligated. This might not be his father. Is therefore Eino Mitavila. When he dies, neither of these two possible fathers can be mitami because the suffix, maybe it's not his relative, he's not related to this son. Now we shift over to Dini Momenos. There are a bunch of definite sons for each one of these two fathers, and they claim the estate for themselves. Now this guy who's caught in between, he fell between the cracks, he wants to claim a part of the Yerusha. Sorry, buddy. Who ain't no Yoresh Osam? They have a right to throw him away, push him away, and say, go prove that you're a Yoresh, that this is your father. Until you prove so, Hamotzi Mechavel Baraya, maybe you're not the son of this deceased, and therefore you have no rights to the estate. Avalheim Yarshim Osam. What does that mean? Haim Yarshim Osam. I think what's going on here, you'll tell me what he says in your translation, that there's a cartel agreement between the two fathers. And the two fathers have a right to get together and say, look, one of us has rights to this estate. We don't know which one of us. We don't know who is the real father. Let's join forces as a partnership. And then we will represent a vadai av. Now, the question that arises in my mind is, would that halacha apply if this Suffolk fellow had other relatives? Well, let's take the simplest case first. He has no other relatives. No one is there waiting online to inherit him or has rights to inherit him. We have only a father, but we don't know who the father is. But the two fathers could join forces. They could shake hands, so to speak, and say, we are coming as a group, and we definitely have a father here in the group, and therefore the Yerusha is ours. We'll split the Yerusha equally between the two of us. Do you have any note on this that might shed another light on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's that case where he.
So what would be if he had a descendant? It shouldn't change.
I mean, his descendant should inherit.
No, I don't think so. His descendant should get half the Yerusha, so to speak. But the other half should go to these two fathers as a cartel, as a.
No, I mean, if he has a son, when his son inherit just him?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean,
you mean then you go through who gets first,
right?
First,
now if
first shot.
Yeah.
I was
no descendant.
I was making a conceptual point, but it's not correct in reality. It's just theoretical. Upatur alma kosa. Let's say he hits one of the two fathers. We don't know who the father is, so we can't put him to death. B'toras Makeh Aviv, which is a pasuk in Parshas Mishpatim Makeh Aviv, the Imo Mos Yumos. Now I would like to know what happens if he hits both of them. I would say that if he hits both of them, it should depend. How did he hit both of them? Did he hit each one separately, or did he take a big stick and he smashed both of them? If he smashed both of them, then for sure he should be chayav because he definitely was makeh aviv. If it was b'zecher zeh, then I can't pin him down and warn him, hey, don't hit this guy because he's your father. Well, he might not be my father, but if he hits both of them, v'vasachas, I would say, again, Lufiani is daitli, he should be chayav in such a.
So we're going to find out.
Oh, he does address that case. V'al kiloloso shel zeh v'shel zeh. He's not chayav misa under the law. Again, in Parshas Mishpat, Mekal Aviv Mos Yumos, because we don't know if he was Mekal's father. Again, what would be if he was Mekal both of them at the same time? Ole v'mishmaro shel zeh v'shel zeh. Interesting. When does this suffix? I mean, again, he's a Vadei Kohen, so he certainly does the avodah. But which mishmeres does he belong to? There's one mishmeres of the children of this father, and there's another of the other father, but we don't know who the father is. And now is saying that he's going to do the avodah for both of mishmaros. Now, I just want to point out the obvious. When it comes to mishmeres of Kohanim, the Kohanim become very possessive. Don't get insulted. They don't want to give up their rights to do the avodah. They wait a half a year, for a week, out of which they get one day in the base Av, they're not eager to share it with another Kohen. So this guy is kind of nudging his way in, and he's saying, I belong to your mishmeres because that is my father. And they want to throw him out. They want to say, no, you'll go prove that you belong to this mishmeres. So the Mishnah says, Ola b'mishmara shel zeh v'shel zeh, that for some unknown reason, at least unknown to me, maybe you'll tell me what the article said, the Bnei Mishmar have no right to say, we're pushing you to the other Mishmar, and he gets bounced back and forth like a medicine ball. Why is that so? Any footnote on that?
Says again, next address.
All right, he's pushing us off. All right, we'll have to be in suspense. V'eno cholek. So I don't know why we're repeating this, but he can't get the chelek ha'oros ha'kadshu. Notice when it comes to dini momenos, the other members of the mishmar have a right to push him to the other mishmar. Again, he gets bounced back and forth because they don't want to give up their rights to acquire ownership and possession over the oros, and he can't prove that he belongs to that mishmar. If let's say both fathers belong to the same mishmar, is a notel chelek echad b'kadshu. So this is similar to what we discussed before about Yerusha. Remember, we said that there could be a cartel, a partnership agreement between the two fathers to inherit the son and divide it up equally amongst the two. Here too, the two fathers, if they belong to the same mishmeres, then the Manav Shach, the son, has rights to get one chelek of the kadshu. Whether he's getting the chelek because of this father or that father is totally irrelevant, because Mimanav Shach, he belongs to this mishmar, and therefore the chelek echad is coming to him. So that's the end of this mission. All right. So this we'll pick up the Gemara Bli Neder tomorrow. And I wish you a great day. So this is a lot of fun. We're learning all the dinim of Spekis and how they apply to Kodshim, how they apply to Truma, how they apply to Dinim Ominous and to Yerusha. And hopefully we'll improve our knowledge, we'll sharpen our knowledge of Torah through this